Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anurekha Chariwag, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. I am coordinating the paper on Sociology of India. Today we are going to discuss the module Ethnicity in India. This module has been written by Sumati Unkule, Research Scholar, Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. In this module, we will study the concept and history of the term ethnicity from sociological perspective and why ethnicity remains a major source of identity for a large number of people in India. Are the present ethnic conflicts results of history or something to do with globalization and neoliberal policies? What is the relationship between globalization and revival of pre-modern identities like ethnicities? Lastly, we will also study the case study of Khalistan, a secessionist movement in India. Objectives: 1. To understand the sociological concept of ethnicity. 2. To understand the various approaches to the study of ethnicity. 3. To study the complexity of ethnic conflicts in India. Introduction. Early modernization theories had assumed that 1. There are recognizably traditional institutions and they constitute a barrier to modernization, and 2. To the extent that modernization takes place, traditional institutions must decline. However, the modernization theorists fail to understand that diversity and prevalence of various forms of traditions, 2. Complexity of traditions' relationship with modernity, and 3. Political significance of a so-called traditional phenomena such as religion, ethnicity, and caste. The social scientists argue that as society modernizes itself, primordial identities like religious, ethnic, caste, and kinship will gradually lose its importance. According to Allison, a world anticipated by the early modernization theory that breaks down people's localized ethnic identities and replaces them with loyalties to larger communities had arrived. With globalization, the concept of homogenization gained credence, and it was thought that the world will be a global village and there will be further eroding of these primordialities. The contemporary world defines its production. Rather today, as argued by Dubé, it looks as though the movement of history reverses and discarded identities get revived, resurrected and reinstated. The rejects of the past have been set up as idols of the present. As a result, each part of the world is engulfed with various ethnic conflicts. Rwanda, Yugoslavia, Georgia, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, North Ireland and many other countries are full of ethnic wars. Development too has not been able to neutralize these identity issues, rather in some cases it has heightened it, argues Sachidananda. Contemporary India too is not an exception to this. Soon after independence, the makers of modern India too believed that as processes of modernization and secularization accelerates, pre-modern identities will eventually wane away. India's image has always been that of a country known for its unity in diversity. Diversity of religion, ethnicity, language and culture, about which it once boasted of, now has become a major source of conflict and poses threat to its nation building project. In this module, we will study the concept and history of the term ethnicity from a sociological perspective and why ethnicity remains a major source of identity for a large number of people in India. Section 1. Conceptualizing ethnicity. Ethnicity remains one of the most complex concepts in sociology. According to the Oxford Dictionary, the word ethnicity means the fact or a state of belonging to a social group that has common national or cultural tradition. One understands ethnicity as a sense of collective belonging which could be based on common descent, language, history, culture, race or religion, or may be a combination of these. Ethnicity is defined as either a large or a small group of people in either backward or advanced societies who are united by a common inherited culture including language, music, food, dress and customs and practices, racial similarity, common religion and belief in a common history and ancestry, and who also exhibit a strong psychological sentiments of belonging to a group, argues Ganguly. An ethnic group exists in the fullest sense when a segment of a larger society is seen by others to be different in some combination of the following characteristics: language, religion, race and ancestral homeland with its related culture. The members also perceive themselves in that way and they participate in shared activities built around the real or imagined common origin or culture, argues Yinger. It is important to recognize that an ethnic group may do without a state of its own and a nation implies bringing ethnicity and statehood together, argues Vashni. According to Giddens, ethnicity refers to cultural practices and outlooks of a given community of a people that set them apart from others. Based on the analysis of Giddens, one can infer that ethnicity refers primarily to distinctiveness of the lifestyle, culture, and it is a social concept. From the above definitions, we can conclude that ethnicity includes features such as 1. To the cultural practices, 2. People see themselves as culturally distinct from other groups, 3. Have different language, history, religion, style of dress, adornment, 4. Ethnic differences are wholly learned, nothing innate about ethnicity, 5. Purely a social phenomena that is produced as reproduced over time, 6. Young people assimilate the lifestyle, norms and beliefs of the communities through socialization, and 6. It is fluid and changing. According to Essman, ethnic groups are of two distinct types, homeland societies and diaspora communities. Ethnic groups are considered as homeland societies when they are a long-time occupants of a particular territory and thereby claim an exclusive as well as a moral right to use it. Often such claims are backed by historical and archaeological evidence. Ethnic diaspora communities are found in foreign countries. They are caused by migrations induced mainly by oppression in their home state or by the attraction of better economic prospects. They cannot claim territorial control in foreign state. Instead, they are normally demand non-discriminatory participation as individuals in public affairs such as voting, office holding, access to justice, plus non-discriminatory access to education, employment, housing and official recognition of the right to maintain institutions that perpetuate elements of the inherited culture, argues Essman. The contemporary political usage of the term ethnic group has been primarily restricted to quasi-national kind of minority group within the state, which has somehow not achieved the status of a nation. Thus, ethnicity is a complex term and it involves various psychological, economic, historical and political factors. Vashni differentiates between nationality and an ethnic group. A nation is a group with a political and territorial home. Nationality is a large ethnic group without such home but with cultural rights pertaining to language and sometimes religion. And an ethnic group is a smaller collective different from nationality but not large enough to be called a nation. It is important to understand that for a shift from an ethnic group to nationhood, territorial concentration remains central. Thus, national demands for sovereignty from territorially concentrated ethnic groups like Quebec, Sikh, Kashmiris, Bengali Muslims, Sri Lankan Tamils. But a conjunction of territorial concentration and ethnicity may be a necessary condition for nationalism, though it is manifestly not sufficient. What is essential to understand as students of sociology that when ethnic conflicts arise, they may take the way of separatist nationalism, thus questioning three principles of nation-state: territoriality, citizenship and sovereignty. In conclusion, one could argue that there are two distinct ways in which term ethnic is interpreted. Within the narrower sense, it refers to racial or linguistic groups, which is widely used in popular discourse in India and in many other parts. In the broader sense, all conflicts based on ascriptive group identities such as race, language, religion, tribe or caste can be called ethnic. History of the term ethnicity. In the book Sociology of Ethnicity, Malevsky has given a detailed history of the term ethnicity. This section draws heavily from the book. Sociologically, the term ethnicity was coined by D. Reisman in 1953 and it gained wider use during the 1960s and 70s. The term ethnicity has its roots in Greek ethnos, that is non-Hellenic and later non-Jewish second-class people. The Anglo-American tradition adopted ethnicity as a substitute for minority groups within a larger society of a nation-state. The European tradition regularly opted the use of ethnicity as a synonym for nationhood defined historically by descent or territory. At the same time, both traditions shared a joint aim to replace the concept of race. Popular discourses in Europe and North America have racialized the concept of ethnicity. The collapse of the colonial world in the 1950s and 60s have further added to the complexity of the meaning of the concept of ethnicity. Following the consolidation of North American popular and legislative discourse, the new post-colonial immigrants who are visibly different have also become defined as ethnic, thus simultaneously preserving old definitions of historical ethnicity by descent or territory while adding the new definition of ethnicity as an immigrant minority. The fall of communism and the breakup of the Soviet-style federation along ethnic lines and the emergence of ethnic cleansing policies in the Balkans and Caucasus have further complicated these definitional issues. With wars on former Yugoslav soil, extensive and influential mass media coverage of ethnic conflicts has seen the term ethnic degenerate into a synonym for tribal, primitive, barbaric and backward. Finally, the ever-increasing influx of asylum seekers, refugees and economic migrants to Western Europe, North America and Australia who do not necessarily express visible or significant physical, cultural or religious differences to their host, together with their uncertain legal status, has relegated the term ethnic to a quasi-legislative domain. In this context, the term ethnicity refers again to non-citizens who inhabit our land, that is, second-class people. From the above discussion regarding the concept and history of ethnicity, it is clear the term ethnicity was used differently and it meant differently in different times of history. Today, it means a large group of minority people having different culture. It is in this context that one also has to understand the concept of race and minority. Related concept, race and minority. Race. Race remains one of the most complex concepts in sociology. In popular usage, race may mean human race or any category of people can be called as belonging to a certain race. Race, according to some people, is a group of people who may be separated from other groups by distinctive physical features like color of skin, hair, structure of jaw, structure of eyes. Race as a term gained usage around 16th century and began to be referred to family, lineage and breed. It was in the 18th century period, especially during the Enlightenment, the age of reason, that the idea of race began to be explored more systematically. Scientific theories of race arose in 18th and 19th centuries. As Trotman states, that terms such as race, nation and stock were used interchangeably in the 18th century, but with the advent of race science as well as European nationalism in the later 19th century, they began to take on political meanings. They were used to justify the emerging social order as England and other European nations became imperial powers ruling over subject territories and populations, argues Giddens. Rathensi puts forth three important dimensions that needs to be taken into account while analyzing race. 1. The idea of race contains both biological and cultural elements. For example, skin color, religion and behavior. Secondly, the biological and cultural aspects projects itself in different degrees in any definition of racial group, and that depends not only on the group but also on the historical period in question. Finally, racial status is subject to and conditioned upon political negotiation and transformation. The post-Second World War has raised serious questions about scientific base of race. It is now accepted that there cannot be a clear-cut races but the range of physical variations in human beings. History has witnessed to various discrimination, prejudice and genocides based on race. As a result, race remains an important concept that interests sociology as it allows certain status and role for individuals and groups in a particular society. Minority. The word minority is used differently in sociology. Largely, people understand minority in statistical terms. In sociology, the term minority means the people or groups that are disadvantaged as compared to the majority population. Also, they have a certain sense of group solidarity because of experiencing same prejudice and discrimination. This has nothing to do with numbers. For example, women are considered as minority even though they are fairly equal in number to the number of men. Jairat argues that while Muslims constitute the largest religious minority in India and are ingrained into the cultural, economic and social space of India, there is a lack of academic recognition of diversity and stratification among Muslims. Thus, for a well-grounded sociology of India, it necessitates a proactive engagement with the study of Muslim communities. Approaches to the study of ethnicity. Scholars are divided in their opinion regarding how ethnic identity is formed and why it persists. Pathi, in his book, has stated debates among the scholars in the area of the study of ethnicity. The debate between primordialist and instrumentalist centers on the nature of ethnic groups. Primordialist approach was put forth first by Edward Shills in 1957. This approach considers ethnicity as a natural bond between people, immutable or primordial. Thus, the formation of political identity from parochial loyalties is believed to be conditioned by natural law, a priori reality. This approach has been criticized as static and naturalistic and as failing to account for the impact of immigration and intermarriage. Instrumentalist approach was put forth by scholars such as E.R. Leach, Abner Cohen, Michael Banton. They emphasize the utilitarian and thus rational bent of ethnic groupings whose shifting shape reflect changing conditions. They conceive ethnicity as an emergent process of power struggles. They believe cultural factors are epiphenomenon to the process. This approach has been criticized for underplaying durable, effective and persisting constructions of ethnic identity. The debate between survivalists and evolutionists is based on how ethnic identities will change. Survivalists argue that ethnicity will go on taking new forms with changing systems and will never disappear, as it serves the basic communal affective needs. While evolutionists argue that ethnicity is destined to wither away and yield to genuine democratic socialist reforms where color, creed and language will not impede full social participation. In the debate between maximalists versus minimalists, the maximalists assert that strong ethnicity manifests itself in violence and bloodshed, while weak ethnicity is expressed in symbolic non-violent ways. While minimalists tend to restrict their interest to one end of the continuum depending on their intentionality level on the strong manifestation of ethnicity. This debate is of little consequences as ethnic processes occur along the whole continuum and at different moments, and one can transform into the other in either ways. Washley states that constructivism approach is very important perspective to understand ethnicity. The core idea within constructivism is that ethnic identities are constructs of modern epoch and that they are social constructs. Such an approach questions the assumptions among people that social categories are natural, inevitable and changing facts of life. Drawing from works of Mamdani and Sunni, the argument is that modernity has transformed the meaning of ethnic identities by bringing the masses into a variety of newer forms of consciousness and meanings. What are these new forms? Washney argues there are three kinds of mechanisms that are important. One, technological, ideational and colonial policies, institutions and practices. Critical among the works is the argument of Anderson developed in his book Imagined Communities, where he states that the rise of print capitalism, that is arrival of the printing press and capitalism as a basic system through which local identities get transformed into larger national interests, argues Chandra. Further drawing from Taylor, it is argued that how such modernity has brought about ideational changes in human life. Specifically, modernity has presented to us the notion of dignity to which all of us are entitled. Thus, Washney argues that much of the ethnic assertion in the modern world is about resisting such confining, demeaning and contemptible pictures of the dominant groups through colonial rulers and state bureaucracies have often relate to the subordinate groups. The key word here is dignity and not material self-interest. As Brass argues, 1. Ethnicity and nationalism are not givens, rather are social and political constructions, and 2. That ethnicity and nationalism are modern phenomena inseparably connected with the activities of the modern centralizing state. Thus, it is important to focus on the specific types of interactions between the leadership of centralizing states and the elites from non-dominant ethnic groups, especially in the peripheries of those states. Theoretical framework. Since the classics of sociological thought, with the exception of Max Weber, did not operate with the term of ethnic, sociologists had to turn to anthropology and in particular to the work of Frederick Barth in order to explain the power of cultural differences, both historically and geographically. Barth defined and explained ethnicity from outside rather than the inside-out traditional approach. It is not the possession of cultural characteristics that makes social group distinct, but rather it is the social interaction with other groups that make that difference possible, visible and socially meaningful. Hence, the focus is the study of ethnic difference has shifted from the study of its contents, that is, structure of language, form of particular customs, the nature of eating habits, to the study of cultural boundaries and social interaction. Cultural differences per se does not create ethnic collectivities. It is a social contact with others that leads to the definition and categorization of an us and a them. Group identities must always be defined in relation to that which they are not, in other words, in relation to non-members of the group. Functionalist theory argues that relations between racial and ethnic groups will be functional and thus leads to stability of a society only when ethnic groups assimilate into that society. Assimilation, according to Giddens, means acceptance of a minority group by the majority population, in which the group takes on values and norms of the dominant cultures. It is in contrast to the values like cultural pluralism and multiculturalism. The conflict theories are concerned with the links between racism and prejudice on the one hand and relationships of power and inequality on the other. According to some Marxist theories, racism was a product of the capitalist system. The system of slavery, colonization and racism remained ways to exploit the labors which remains essential aspect of capitalism. Ethnic discrimination. Throughout history, discrimination has been practiced on the basis of ethnic identities in most of the societies. Three broad categories of ethnic discrimination can be identified. Firstly, the most severe acts involving mass societal aggression, such as the Nazi during the World War II, The second category involves denial of access to societal opportunities and rewards in areas such as employment, education, housing, healthcare and justice. For example, the apartheid regime in South Africa. The third category of ethnic discrimination includes the use of derogatory or abusive language or forms of representation that are felt to be offensive. For example, racist jokes. Ethnic groups in India. Indian society has a complex history of more than 5,000 years. It's a history of series of migration, assimilation, accommodations, invasions and wars. There is no written account of the early India and therefore it is impossible to identify the earliest inhabitants of India. According to Dubey, we can speculate about the original people of India on the basis of information provided by physical anthropology regarding the ethnic elements, that is, the racial groups in the population of India. The most authoritative and widely accepted classification is by Guha, who identified 6 major racial elements in the populations of India. The Negroids from Africa are considered as the earliest people to have come to India. The Jarawas, the Onjis are some of the examples. Proto-Australide is numerically more significant groups which forms most of the tribes of Middle India. Mongolide are tribals of the northeast. Mediterraneans are the people of South India. They are believed to be the residents of the land before the Aryans. The western Brachycephals include Armenoids. The Parsis and Kodavas fall in this category. They are the broad-headed people living mainly on the western side of the country, such as Ganga Valley and the delta parts of Kashmir, Kathiawar, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Nordics or the Indo-Aryans. These groups were the last one to immigrate to India. They came to India somewhere between 2000 and 1500 BC. They are now mainly found in the northern and central part of India. The Nordics were the last major ethnic element to arrive in India and make profound impact on its culture and society, argue Guha. With the advent of Aryans around 2000 to 1500 BC, the process of Aryanization began. The Aryans influenced Indian society in a fundamental way. The ideological and social framework of the Indian society began taking shape when the area of interaction between Indo-Aryans and other earlier inhabitants widened. The earlier phase was characterized by considerable cultural conflict and warfare. Gradually, pluralism became stabilized and a cultural mosaic being formed. India has a history of more than 5,000 years and have been migration for centuries from various parts of the world. After Aryans, many others like the Greeks, Arabs, Turks, Mughals, Portuguese and the British invaded India at various epochs in history. With these invaders came their culture and religion. As a result, various types of groups with their own unique culture proliferated in India. As a result, Indian population is polygenetic and a blend of various cultures and races from the world. The contemporary Indian culture is a product of amalgamation of all these cultures. The metaphor unity in diversity is a result of this. Ethnic conflicts in India. With this long history of conquest and invasions, contemporary India is a country where people from different communities, religions have lived together for centuries. Gradually, India as a nation emerged. With the advent of British and other foreign rulers, India began to emerge as a nation. The British rulers consciously followed the policy of divide and rule. As a result, though the nation fought together against them to gain freedom, they were successful in dividing India on the basis of religion. The Constitution of India, implemented on 26 January 1950, guarantees fundamental rights to the citizens, ensuring equality, freedom and justice. There is a rule of law and all citizens are equal irrespective of their religion, birth, caste, class, language or ethnicity in front of the law. In spite of all these constitutional and legal safeguards promoting national integration, ethnic conflicts started taking place due to distinctions made between the groups based on language, ethnicity and regions. Problems started arising when people speaking different languages and belonging to different states like Gujarati, Marathi, Assamese, Oriya, Hindi and others considered each other different in the national context. The problems of the northeast region are particularly acute as they never felt as belonging to India. This was because of various reasons like poor connectivity to other parts of India, history, their culture was not adequately represented and many are ethnically, linguistically and culturally very distinct from the other states of India. Further, they are territorially organized in such a manner that ethnic and cultural specificities were ignored during the process of delineation of state boundaries in the 1950s and many other. As a result, northeast region of India is simmering with various ethnic conflicts and secessionist movements to have erupted in Nagaland. Eventually, these ethnic identities were used to promote narrow ends posing a threat to national integration. This remains a challenge in front of India. Nation building was challenging in India, especially because of what Srinivas calls as runaway ethnicity. In runaway ethnicity, loyalty to the group one belongs to is compounded by other factors like language, religion, economic backwardness and isolation. He further states that runaway ethnicity is bad enough, But when to it is added the continuous immigration of outside groups which threaten to swamp numerically and culturally the indigenes, the situation is likely to become explosive. Such conflicts and ethnic politics also impact gender relations specifically. Nongbre, in an analysis of Khasi, a Matrilineal tribe of the northeast India, states that rising ethnic politics has affected women negatively. How does this happen? She argues as gender identity is treated as synonymous with ethnic identity, ethnic politics is reinforcing women's subordinate position within the tribe. Nongbre observes that with the tribe's accession to the Indian Union and the political modernization of the northeast region, the link between ethnicity, patriarchy and the state, which was lying dormant in the traditional political setup, has come to the fore. The unequal patterns of development expose the tribes to exploitation in the hands of outsiders, provided the immediate imperative for this tripartite partnership. Thus, ethnic politics is played on the body of women through controlling and regulating their sexuality and labor. The concept of globalization has also added to the complexity. Though migration was a common phenomenon even before, yet post-globalization it has accelerated migratory movements of people within and across borders. These migratory movements have added to the ethnic diversity and have given rise to various social, political and economic issues. These have given rise to various issues relating to ethnic identities and ethnic conflicts. Many a times, because of these cultural, historical and social factors, ethnic conflicts have been violent and many secessionist movements have emerged throughout India at different times. In the following section, we are going to study the case study of Khalistan, a secessionist movement which had emerged in Punjab. Khalistan movement in Punjab. The Khalistan movement emerged around the 1980s in Punjab. It was a secessionist movement that aspired to create a separate Sikh country called Khalistan in the Punjab region. Khalistan literally means the land of the pure people. From the years 1980 to 1992, the state of Punjab was full of violent conflict to establish Khalistan. Almost 25,000 people have lost their life, argues died. According to Jodhka, the rise of a powerful Khalistan movement was an unprecedented development in post-independence India. It was unprecedented because Punjab was a well-integrated part of the country. There had never been any doubts about the nationalist credentials of the Sikh, and Punjab had done well economically during the post-independence period. Therefore, the rise of secessionist movement was a puzzle for many and a challenge for the academia. This movement is significant for other various reasons. Firstly, it changed the popular image of Punjab from a state known for its economic progress to a crisis-ridden state. 2. It raised many critical questions on secularism, culture, community identities. And 3. Rights that challenged some of the basic assumptions around which the independent Indian nation was being forged. Let us briefly see the history of Punjab and Khalistan movement. The history of Punjab and Khalistan movement is based on the various sources from the internet and a book on the history of modern India written by B.L. Grover. The region of Punjab has been the traditional homeland of the Sikhs, where the Sikh religion was born sometime around the 1500 AD. Its founder Guru Nanak and 9 gurus developed the Sikh community over the next centuries. When the demand for Pakistan was made at Lahore Resolution, some Sikh leaders were concerned that the community would be left without any homeland after partition, this was largely because Pakistan had demanded a large part of Punjab. This led to some of the Sikh community leaders to put forth the idea of Khalistan, which covered the greater Punjab region. But they were unable to demand their own state as it was too small in number to resist Pakistan claims to Punjab. Only by siding with India they were able to keep up the part of Punjab. After the partition was announced, the majority of the Sikhs migrated from the Pakistani part to the Indian province of Punjab, which then included parts of the present-day Haryana and Himachal Pradesh. The Punjabi Suba movement led by Akali Dal aimed to create a Punjabi majority state in the Punjab region of India in 1950s. The States Reorganization Commission did not recognize Punjabi as being very distant from Hindi and rejected the demand. However, in 1966, after years of Sikh demands, India divided the Punjab into 3, recreating Punjab as a state with a Sikh majority. The Sikhs continuously felt oppressed with the way in which boundaries were set up of the new state. As a result, Khalistan movement reached its zenith in 1970s and 1980s, for which they got monetary assistance from NRI Sikhs. In 1984, Operation Blue Star was launched by Government of India. The object was to eliminate organized secessionist movement that the government believed that was being operated from the temple. This invasion of the holiest place of the Sikhs infuriated many of them, even the non-militant. The result of this was almost 1000 of Sikh militants were killed, followed by the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in October 1984 by two Sikh bodyguards. This was followed by anti-Sikh riots throughout India in which thousands of Sikhs lost their life. Sikhs are still resentful that action has not been taken against all those who were responsible. On 26 January 1986, a gathering passed a resolution favoring the creation of Khalistan. Subsequently, a number of rebel militant groups in favor of Khalistan waged a major insurgency which was suppressed by the security forces. Sikh political groups such as Khalsa Raj Party and Saad-e continued to pursue an independent Khalistan through non-violent means. Pro-Khalistan organizations such as Dal Khalsa are also active outside India. They are supported by a section of the Sikh diaspora. According to Jyotka, the rise of Khalistan movement coincided with the then interest in the questions of nationalism and ethnicity. In the fast globalizing world, the homeland has once again become easily accessible to the diaspora. The economic mobility experienced by some sections of the working class Punjabi migrants helped them send their children to schools and universities. Turmoil in the homeland obviously generated passion and interest among many of them. Having settled themselves economically, they understandably began to think of their cultural identities once again. Many of the writings on Khalistan movement emanated from the then dominant paradigm of modernization and saw crises like those in Punjab primarily as transitional phenomena, a problem in the evolutionary process of nation building or a consequence of elite manipulation, a typical feature of young democracies like India. Many saw the communal mobilizations among the Sikhs as a response to the anxieties created by the process of modernization. He insists that it was necessary to look at the politics of ethnicity and identities from the perspective of political economy. According to Dyke, a Sikh militant movement in Punjab is unlikely to emerge again in near future because of the exhaustion from the militant era. The shift towards federalism in the Indian political system and the increased importance of state-level political parties, the rise of Bharatiya Janata Party and the emergence of coalition politics. Conclusion. The above sections deal with sociological concept of ethnicity and its history. It describes how ethnicity remains a complex yet significant concept in contemporary times. Lastly, it discusses the case of Khalistan, a secessionist movement in India around the 1980s. After discussing the concept of ethnicity in India, we as students of sociology can very well understand how complex the term ethnicity is. It has very close connections with the term race and minority, and further we also need to understand that we have to locate ethnicity as a historical concept. Over time, space and history, the concept and the meaning of ethnicity has changed. Further, we also need to understand ethnicity within the larger political economic concept. Thank you.